Welcome, warriors. This week, with her permission, I am re-airing an interview Dr. Carron Silva did with me on her podcast, Forgiveness is for You. Grab a tissue and learn more about my experience with forgiveness during one of the most difficult times of my life. Let's rock. Does your past haunt you? Maybe you're in a storm that feels like it will never end. Are you fighting a battle that's rendering you hopeless? Maybe you feel like you're fighting alone, but your battle was not meant to be a solo endeavor. You were meant to be a warrior among warriors. My name is Heather, and I grew up thinking my battles were nobody's business until I found myself in an abusive marriage and felt cut off from all avenues of help. In this podcast, you will hear warriors' words. They will tell you of their battles, both won and lost, their journeys, and their lessons learned along the way. But we don't stop there. These warriors will share how they have applied those lessons to go from warrior to survivor to thriver. Whether it's an abusive marriage, illness, mental health crisis, or any number of traumas this world dishes out, these warriors will use their words to help you find the beauty in your broken, move beyond your battles, and become the thriver God created you to be. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome back to the Warrior Words podcast. Before we dig into this week's episode, here is a review from Victor A. Very encouraging. Thanks for sharing and encouraging here. Thank you, Victor. I always love hearing that the podcast is encouraging. I appreciate that you took the time to leave your review. Would you like me to read your review on an upcoming episode? Please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Your comments and your star ratings help people find the Warrior Words podcast. It only takes a few minutes of your time and would help so much. Also, the Warrior Words Facebook community is now open. Come and join us for inspirational stories and lessons learned and a few beauty bombs. And what's a beauty bomb? Well, you'll have to join us to find out. Go to facebook.com/groups/warrior words and request to join. Please answer the few questions that pop up after requesting. I look forward to getting to know you there. Now, on to the show.
Hello, forgivers. I am so happy we have with us Heather Gaffney. Heather is an author, podcaster, and YouTuber. She's the host of the Warrior Words podcast and the Beauty in the Broken YouTube channel. Heather has a master's degree in education. She's the mom of 2 young adult children. She is also a domestic abuse survivor, breast cancer survivor, and autism advocate. Her favorite things include caramel coffee drinks, good books, sappy movies, the colors of nature, and spending time with a master artist in prayer. Heather, welcome to the Forgiveness is for You podcast.
Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate the invitation to be here to hopefully have my story help some of your listeners, or maybe just one, just if I can just help one listener with my story, that would be fantastic.
Yes, I absolutely believe in that starfish analogy, the story about the person going along the beach and picking up the one starfish. That's my philosophy too.
I love that. I love that analogy. Yes.
Yes, I also love this expression, I serve whoever shows up.
Very good.
Heather, tell me about a little bit more. I'm sure, this is your official bio, but there's probably a lot there that we don't know yet. So can you tell us a little bit more about your story?
Sure. So the Warrior Words podcast actually is pretty new, released in January. And with that, I try to help warriors. And we use our words to help share stories about battles that we have encountered, ones that we've won, ones that we've lost, and then how we go on to thrive after that. And kind of piggybacking with that is the Beauty and the Broken YouTube channel. That is about art. And you also read about, I like spending time with the master artist. And I've always had an inclination towards art, and I've never considered myself an artist. In that channel, I try to talk about the brokenness that we have in life and how sometimes it just comes out of messes that either we create ourselves or that we walk into, or whatever the circumstances are, but that there can always be beauty found somewhere. And I think that's true. It's a parallel in our lives too, that we can find some beauty in every mess and every battle that we encounter. I do have a master's degree in education, and I used it for a few years. Then I decided to homeschool my own children. I will say you do not have to have a degree in education to homeschool. I'll preface it with that, but I do find that, it helped me with a love of education and just to be able to give my children the best education that I could provide for them.
I'm going to circle back a little bit to warrior words.
Okay.
What is your typical profile of a warrior?
I probably had a typical profile before I launched.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of envisioned my person as being a woman, maybe in her 30s to 50s, who has seen something, experienced something traumatic, and then battled it, survived it, and then moved on to thrive. And my definition of thrive is succeeding in life to a point where you're helping someone else. You're taking your lessons that you've learned and you're applying them to help someone. After a few interviews, I started to realize, and intellectually, I guess you probably know this, but maybe you just don't think about it. Most people, and I'm going to say people because even though I've only interviewed women, I have a few men lined up in the wings that I'm trying to get on interviews, but most people encounter more than one trauma and more than one battle in their lives that they need to be a warrior for. And sometimes it's that same battle that they have to go back and be a warrior for again and again and again. It's been enlightening because I don't think there is a typical profile anymore. Yeah, that has changed and shifted for me in a short 2 months. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so that's a perfect segue for us to go into the battle that you mentioned you mentioned 3 battles. You are a domestic abuse survivor, a breast cancer survivor, and you're an autism advocate. Can you tell us a little bit about the domestic abuse? What was that like for you to battle yourself, to come out victorious in that battle?
Well, that's probably the longest and most intense of the 3. Although the autism advocate, I don't think you ever stop that one. But so the domestic abuse, I married late, mm-hmm. and I think that was part of my issue, is that I heard that proverbial biological clock, and I had already been told by several medical professionals that it would be difficult for me to conceive in the first place. So I think it was 30. I was 30 years old, and I had somebody contact me from my college days, and it was somebody I really, really was enamored with. We had a whirlwind kind of romance, very short. In retrospect, a lot of things I ignored. Mm-hmm. And I think it was because I heard that clock ticking. I knew I was 30. I knew my chances were dwindling, or at least that's what I told myself. My chances were dwindling. I don't know that that's accurate anymore. And so I ignored a lot of things, and that was to my detriment.
They say, love is blind and marriage takes off the blinders, right?
Oh, it sure did. It sure did. I want to preface this too by saying my ex-husband is still alive. I am not here to bash him, and I am not here to blame him. I don't want to talk negatively about him as a person. That's something that he needs to work on with God in his own personal life. So I want to focus more on my experiences and how I reacted. There were these red flags. I ignored them. The blinders that you mentioned, they came off on the wedding night, actually. Mm-hmm. And it was very telling. It was a rough evening. I'm not going to say there weren't good parts and bright spots, but I really saw what I had gotten myself into, and I felt stuck immediately. Within 24 hours, I felt stuck. And one thing that I've talked about, I think I talked about it in my episode on this topic. We had the opportunity, the Catholic Church offers us, the opportunity for marriage prep. We kind of breezed through that. He was in a different state. and we kind of did it long distance. So I guess we kind of glossed over a few things that maybe we shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
I think the program would have caught a few things had we given it the opportunity to do so. But moving forward a bit, there was a lot of yelling and name calling and belittling, and I felt not enough, not good enough. I felt a lot of anger and resentment. I did end up having 2 children within 18 months of each other, again, because I had that fear of not being able to conceive. And so I did try multiple times. And when I said I try, I guess I wasn't the only person in the room.
Yeah, right.
We tried.
Yeah.
And I have 2 beautiful children, 2 absolutely beautiful children. They would balk at that because they're in their 20s now. So they're not, they're always your babies, but they're not children anymore. The interesting twist that this story takes is that I got beaten down, and I'm not going to say physically. There was a little bit of physical, but it was very, very mild. And it was more of threats and things with, taking objects away and ripping things away, things like that. I was not, beaten into a corner, and I did not need medical attention for that. So I want to be very clear. So I was mentally, emotionally beaten down to a point where I just felt like I had no help. I had no hope. I had no resources. I did what a lot of typical abuse victims do and was silent. I told no one. So nobody knew what I was going through. I finally, and I wish I could pinpoint an action or a phrase or something, but something shifted in me, and I can only attribute it to the Holy Spirit. But something shifted in me, and either my backbone grew or something happened, and I took matters into my own hands and shared it with family members, and I was able to leave, and I was able to get out. My children and I went and lived somewhere else for a while, and that was scary. That was very scary because I was a homeschooling parent. It was something we agreed on. I had no income. I had no real money savings to speak of, and I didn't know what I was going to do. There was a lot of fear with that. So I went through the annulment process with the Catholic Church, and that may be something I can talk a little bit more about when we talk about process, but I did go through that, and it was very healing, and my marriage was annulled. And then I started to move on. But there's a part 2, because this is the shocking twist. He came back and convinced me he had changed.
Yeah.
And I took him back.
And this happens very often, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because if we look at this from a trauma perspective, our brains want to go back to what is familiar to us, even though it may be detrimental to us mentally, physically, psychologically.
Yes. And well, I won't get ahead of myself. So I did take him back. And my primary reason for that at the time was for my children. I told myself that I had an opportunity to give my kids an intact household, a mother and a father in a home, and that anything I had to withstand was going to be worth that. It wasn't. Things were really good for a few months, and I was convinced that he had changed. There was no arguing. There was no name calling. It was pleasant. It was happy. We had a lot of good fun times. Then we had to move. And when we moved, things changed. Not only did things pick up where they left off, but they got worse and they intensified. My children were now old enough to understand what some of those names that I was being called meant. And they were starting to show signs of trauma. And that's when the guilt really set in. What had I done? What had I done to my children? That time, we did not get married in the church. We got married with a justice of the peace. I think my faith has grown and changed and developed so much since then. I like to say I learned a lot more about my faith by teaching my children than I had gotten through years of CCD and and other things. At that time, I did not know that getting married by a justice of the peace was considered a sin by the church, and that it was not even considered a marriage. And so, in fact, I even went to confession before, and the priest at the time didn't say anything to me. So there's something that I needed to forgive as well, I had a little bit of, well, why didn't you say anything? Things did get worse. It just involved so much ugliness. And I don't want to necessarily get into details about that because, again, it's not about the other person. It's about me. We ended up going to a Christian counseling couple. It was a husband and wife team, and they specialized in marriage. And what they would do is they would meet with us together. So all four of us got to know each other. And then the wife would meet with me and the husband would meet with him. At one point, I had surgery and I was laid up. I couldn't walk. I was on narcotics. My kids were both preteens with me on narcotics, unable to walk, unable to drive. I was told he was leaving and he left all three of us. We had to start all over again. There was a lot more resentment there that the timing that was chosen. So it just added a whole other layer of things that I was angry about. So, yeah, the forgiveness process had to start all over. No, wait, let me take that back. I don't think I ever forgave him from the first time. I don't think there was a ton of work on that the first time.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a clear understanding at the time of what it meant to forgive your ex-husband?
No, we would actually have arguments. That was one of our arguments, was about what the meaning of the word forgiveness was. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the origin of that was. Maybe it would, actually, I think it probably had to do with some of the arguments that we would have. He would throw my Catholic faith, and he's Catholic as well. We had a different definition of what the Catholic faith was. And so he would throw that in my face and say, well, you're Catholic. You're supposed to forgive me because I'm, I can't move on unless you forgive me. And I just always felt like there was something wrong with that. And my response was, no, my forgiveness of you is not for you. My forgiveness of you is for me. It's for me to let go of that. So I don't hold that grudge. And so, yeah, we did argue about that, but I don't think that I really felt like, I guess after the first one, I didn't think that I had anything that I needed to forgive.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. Tell me more.
In that first initial period, he was all wrong. He was 100% wrong. And I was not. Mm-hmm. And boy, was I wrong. Because I just didn't think that it was my responsibility at that point, even though my argument throughout the marriage was, well, it's for me. It's not for you.
Yes.
But I didn't think I had to forgive him because I just was in my own bubble thinking that he was 100% wrong and he was the sole cause of everything. And if I could go back to the reason that I mentioned that Christian couple is that after he left the second time, I kept meeting with her because I figured she knew the situation. She knew me. She said, and she has the training and the licenses and all of this to diagnose. She said that she would diagnose him as a narcissistic sociopath. I had to look up both of those words because I had no idea. Now, this is not me doing the diagnosis or me doing the judging, but just what she shared with me. And I looked back, and in one way, it justified my unforgiveness, because if he was this thing or if he was that thing, then I didn't need to forgive that. That was all his stuff, and it was all about him. And again, I was wrong.
How were you wrong? What did you have to claim?
I will admit I was not the best wife, I guess. I didn't know how to be a wife. Even if we had gone through the marriage prep in a way that we were supposed to, there's not wife training and husband training. There's stereotypes as to the husband is supposed to do this and the wife is supposed to do that, but there's no actual training on being a good spouse. So I don't think I entered marriage knowing exactly what to do. I was a horrible housekeeper. I still am. It's just that's not something that I'm good at. And there's my own, it's probably my own laziness streak that I still have to deal with. But that was part of it. He would get angry because I wouldn't do this or that, or I didn't do it right. I didn't do it up to his standards. And so there were things that I was not good at. And there were things I didn't make any effort to change or to fix or to better. And I'm not saying that had I been the perfect wife, he would have been the perfect husband, because if those diagnoses are accurate, then that's more of a mental health thing that needs to be dealt with differently. But I could have been better. I could have responded better. And I think I didn't know to own those things, or maybe I didn't care to own those things until I learned a little bit more. The annulment process helped because they get so specific in the questions that they ask that you really have to examine your part. And were you aware, and did you do what you could? And it really made you think about what your part was. So.
Yes, I think, just for clarification to our listeners, the understanding of marriage is that as we enter into a marriage with someone, that we are free. We're giving ourselves totally free to the other person for their good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
So if we come into marriage and we are only saying we're only going to give to you to this point, and at this point my giving stops, that is not a total gift of self, right? For the good of the other.
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So what I'm hearing you say is you came into the marriage, but you weren't fully committed to give of yourself to this other person. There were some conditions that you had.
I don't know that I had conditions. I think that I think that I truly entered the marriage 100%.
Okay.
When I was faced with the worst, they say the better, for better or for worse. When I was faced with the worst, I don't think I knew how to handle it.
Okay.
That makes sense. And sometimes, I do 100% honesty. I do have a stubborn streak. So sometimes when confronted with a situation that you don't feel is right, you can act indignant. And that is kind of what I did. If he said he wanted this done by a certain date and time, I might take 5 extra minutes or take an extra half an hour or not do it completely. And that was my little tiny defiance. That probably wasn't so tiny in his eyes.
But looking at his mental state, as you've said, so you're dealing with these issues of trauma in your marriage. And so this sets you up in competition with each other, pretty much. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Yeah,
I think that's an accurate assessment. The only difference would be I didn't know anything about the mental side of it, not having even considered it. I saw it as bullying and being mean. And I had grown up with enough bullying and being mean directed at me that my responses included the indignance or the spite, and it included shutting down. So I guess those were the two ends of my response spectrum, is I would either shut down and not do it, or do it almost out of spite.
So like from a trauma perspective, if we're looking at the fight, flight, freeze, you were either fighting or you were freezing, going in and out of those responses. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. I never looked at it that way, but I would either freeze and shut down and do nothing.
So your forgiveness process, you said you were working through your annulment, which in the church is basically the tribunal goes back and they look at the conditions under which you got married, right?
Correct.
And so they look at, did each person come into the marriage totally free, and was their intent to keep their vows and stay committed? And then there are all these conditions that they look at if you met, and if you didn't meet those conditions, then there's a decision whether the marriage was valid or not valid. How did that process help you, other than looking at where you were at fault? How else did that process help you work through a process of forgiveness? I
think it got the ball rolling because, as I mentioned, I don't think I fully forgave him in between marriage 1 and marriage 2, but I think it got the ball rolling and got me thinking about it. I've spoken with my mother about this, and she reminds me that I didn't want to forgive. I didn't want to forgive him. I didn't want to, it was just not something that I felt that I needed to do. And honestly, that's something that I hear from a lot of domestic abuse, domestic violence survivors, is they don't want to forgive because they equate forgiveness with forgetting or equate forgiveness with acceptance. And yes, there's a certain amount of acceptance. You have to accept that this happened to you, and in part you let it happen. And I said in part because I don't believe that abuse victims deserve it. I don't think that they invited it necessarily, but I do believe in part we allow things to happen and we stay longer than necessary for one reason or another. It helped me to see that the process needed to start, that I could not move on with my life fully without at least considering it, without moving forward with that forgiveness. But it took a long time. And I think it got set back. Like I was in the process of forgiving when marriage part 2 happened. And so when the abuse got worse the second time around, I think I put up a wall again. It's like, okay, God, I tried this forgiveness thing. I tried this letting him back in, and now it got worse. And so there was a wall to the forgiveness aspect of it coming out of the second one. And it took a long time.
What did that look like practically for you?
It meant a lot of prayer. It was a lot of prayer, a lot of allowing myself to take a look back, a lot of examining certain situations within the marriage, examining my own responses. Honestly, it also took learning more about what a narcissist is and learning what a sociopath is, how much of that is actually within someone's control. A lot of it is not. I had to accept it. First of all, that some of that just isn't. And again, this goes back to assuming that those diagnoses are correct. And that's what I'm operating under right now, because that actually helped me. If he was not completely in control of his own behavior, then it wasn't mean. The intent was not necessarily, I don't know that I can come out and say that there was no intent to hurt me, because I do believe that there was, but I also believe that there was some of it that just was not in his control. That is freeing. That's weird to say.
Yes. So separating the individual from the mental illness.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And it's very difficult to do. I can't say that I read a scripture passage or I read a book or I had lightning strike. There was just a day when I could say, I forgive you. It just kind of that happens with prayer with me a lot, is that there's a subtle shift and I don't realize it's happening until it's there.
Yes. And modern science has taught us that our words become flesh.
Yes. Yes. That whole be careful what you think, because your thoughts become, and they ultimately become actions.
Yes.
Yes. And while I have not faced him face to face, I have sent some apology texts owning up to what I did or what I didn't do. I don't think I've sent that I forgive you text. And I'm not sure that I need to, because if forgiveness truly is for myself and for my ability to let go of grudges, then I don't know that I need to open that door to whatever's on the other side.
That is exactly what this podcast is all about, right? Forgiveness is not reconciliation.
Right. And yeah, and that's another thing too. I've had conversations with both of my children about forgiveness, because I can't forgive their father for them.
Correct.
And I cannot forgive. There's nothing else I can really do on their behalf. They have to do their own journey and they have to come to that conclusion themselves. But we talk about it. I've had to say something to one of my children about how you don't have to allow him back into your life in order to be free of the anger and the resentment and to go through the forgiveness process. And I think that's happening in conversations that I've had with them. I think it's happening. It's personal. Yeah. So it's between them and God, and to whatever extent they want to extend that to their father, because that's.
Absolutely. So I've heard you use the words anger and resentment. And, in the last episode, I interviewed my husband, who had actually brought up the emotion of bitterness. Mm-hmm. Were there times when you felt yourself just so bitter that you felt like, okay, there's no possibility here of ever forgiving?
I think that day sitting on the couch when I was informed that he was leaving, and I looked at my crutches and my swollen foot, knowing that I could not even get groceries. I couldn't cook dinner. I could barely get to the bathroom, so I couldn't shower. I remember the anger boiling up inside of me and just feeling that bitterness that how could you do this to me? And how could you do this to your children? Because there's no one to care for them. And that was something that I did not think that I could forgive, because that to me was worse than all of the words that were hurled my way. It was worse than objects being hurled as well. And so that is a very definitive moment. There were others, the phone calls, the texts, the threats. That was a tough one. I was bitter for a while after that.
How did you get to this place from bitterness? Because in that prior episode, my husband talks about how there's really no redemption in bitterness because we're closing ourselves off. Right. Whereas when we move into sorrow, there's kind of hope in that suffering. How did you find yourself moving through that bitterness into this place of sorrow and later being able to forgive?
I think conversations with my mother helped. And conversations with that Christian therapist, being able to talk through the emotions, talk through solutions. Because I think when he first left and I'm sitting there with no solutions, fear and anger, I think all of those block that grace. When you have that bitterness and that anger and that fear, you can't see what the possibilities are. And you have to express them, not stuff them, but express them. And with both my mother and that therapist, I was able to express those feelings freely and fully. When I could release those, I was able to hear, well, you could do this. Or let's try this solution. It's baby steps. It's one step at a time to work through, okay, this is where you are now. Let's work on the needs first. Let's work on healing. Let's work on training your daughter to use the stove or asking someone to go get groceries. Taking care of the immediate physical needs first. And then from there, once those solutions are in place, then you can start working on, okay, well, now what else can we do? The further I got from that day and the more solutions that were put into place, it removed that baggage and removed those blocks. You know, I guess you could maybe kind of think of them as bricks, and you can remove them one at a time. And the more you remove, the more you can see. The more you can see that there is that hope that your husband mentioned. There's something on the other side of that brick wall with the removal of each brick.
Yeah, you can see the light coming through, right? Light is coming in. Yeah.
Yes.
And if you can imagine that light as grace, that infused grace that's coming into your soul, which gives you the strength then to take this act, this decision, to make a decision, because it is an act of the will to forgive.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. You have to make a decision and do it. Mm-hmm.
So what have been some of the fruits in your life after your forgiving your ex?
The biggest thing is honestly being able to see Christ in people, not just the people we deem as good or the people we deem as holy, but being able to see Christ in all people, even those that you are angry with and even those that you disagree with. And I can honestly say now, many years later, that I can see Christ in him, and I can see some of the positive, bright spots that were in our marriage and some good things that he did. And I can acknowledge those. And if he were in front of me and asked me if there was anything positive, I could come up with something today. I don't think I could have done it 5 years ago, but I can do it today. And I put my money where my mouth is, so to speak. And I pray for him. I've said rosaries in his name, whether he wants that or not, I don't know. And I don't need to know. But the fact that I can say his name in conjunction with prayer and not feel that anger and not feel that bitterness anymore.
Yes. And that's, in the catechism, it states that, the Holy Spirit will help us intercede for the person who has harmed us if we forgive. And that is so beautiful. And I'm hearing you speak, and I'm just thinking about your work, finding beauty in the broken. And that's definitely that the evidence is so clear in your life and in your story.
It is. And I think that was the whole point of the YouTube channel, in that a lot of people can relate to art, they can relate to creativity, but then to bring in, like, one of the things that I do is paint pouring. In paint pouring, you take a cup and you pour various colors in one cup. and it looks pretty messy. It looks just like a hodgepodge of just things in this cup. And then you pour it out onto a canvas and it's still kind of, there's elements of beauty, but it's still kind of a mess. It's just a puddle. And you stretch it and you get rid of some things and you tilt it and you manipulate it. And the end product has something beautiful. And I think that's what happens in life. There are things that need to be pruned and gotten rid of, and there are things that need to be stretched, and there are things that need to be moved around. And I think even in the ugliest parts of our lives, we can find something. So if I look back on that day that he left, I can find the beauty in that my daughter learned how to cook. She shouldn't have had to, but she did. And she rose above, and she has had a love for cooking ever since.
That's lovely.
So, sometimes it's the simple things. Like maybe, you have storm clouds outside and they're dark and they're angry looking, but the way that the brightly colored tree shines in front of it, it's just beautiful.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story. How can people find you?
Well, Warrior Words is on all major podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify. Beauty and the Broken is on YouTube, and it's actually There's Beauty and the Broken, THERES, There's. But yeah, those are the two places that I can be found, Warrior Words on podcasts and YouTube's There's Beauty and the Broken.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, listeners, for being here with us. Forgivers, until next time, much love.
Dr. Carron has a passion for helping people understand what forgiveness actually is. I love how her questions brought out some revelations and conclusions that helped me stitch my story together in a more cohesive quilt. And I like the analogy of a quilt, because in quilting, you take scraps of fabric or smaller pieces of fabric in various shapes and colors, and then you piece them together to create an image or a pattern. Then that image is attached to a background, and that's usually done with stitches that are also added in a pattern. All of these pieces and patterns and shapes and colors, they all combine to make a beautiful blanket that adds both beauty and warmth. The questions Carron asked me got me to consider things that ended up piecing things together for me, creating beauty where parts were missing. The part of our conversation where we discussed bitterness and resentment brought us to the conclusion that they blocked the grace God had for me and for anyone holding on to those. So I want to ask you, are there any situations in your life where you are holding on to bitterness or resentment? And how can you start to remove the bricks, one at a time, that are part of resentment's wall between you and God's grace? Something to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.